We got to get right to business. John Tortorella out, Brad Shaw in, interim. We got a lot of John Tortorella talk today. We got a lot of Colorado talk today, a lot of LA talk today. We got Kevin Kurz stopping by from The Athletic. We'll talk about the news that broke this morning. Philadelphia Flyers relieving John Tortorella his services as head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. Also, Cassie Campbell-Pascall stops by towards the bottom of the hour. From ESPN, game analyst there. She'll talk about tonight's matchup, Colorado versus Los Angeles. Also, we should get the latest from Cassie on the PWHL and impending expansion. I'm guessing Seattle, Vancouver right out of the gates, but we'll get more from Cassie coming up here towards the bottom of the hour. Zach Phillips, you are going to be very, very sleepy tomorrow. You are going to be very, very tired when you go to bed because your Leafs postgame show is going to be in the very, very wee hours of the morning because your Maple Leafs are facing off against the San Jose Sharks. It's a pretty busy and vibrant night around the NHL. Still think the game of the night is going to be LA, Colorado. Cassie on that coming up in a bit. But quick thought from you before we get to our daily outlines. John Tortorella is out as the Philadelphia Flyers head coach. I'm a little bit surprised at this one. Surprised they didn't do this at the end of the season.
That was more my takeaway, is that I was surprised it didn't wait till the end of the season. I don't know. I'm interested to hear from Kevin and kind of get your thoughts on this as well. If yesterday's press conference or 2 days ago post game had much to do with that, and then the noise that came out of it. But I don't know. You're what? 10 days away? Why? You're 10 games away. Sorry.
I know.
Why couldn't you have just waited? What does it change from now till then?
I don't know. We'll talk to Kevin Kurz about that. Get his thoughts. Very close to the situation. Obviously covering the Philadelphia Flyers for The Athletic. Other things up for grabs on the program today we'll get to, but initially let's get to our daily outlines presented by our friends and partners at FanDuel. Daily outline presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more with North America's #1 sports book. We're going to do a lot of coach talk today and who's going to go where and what's next for John Tortorella. But coming up on the program today, yes, we will talk plenty about John Tortorella with Kevin Kurz of The Athletic. I think a lot of us do wonder, as much as John Tortorella talked about, this is going to be my last contract, this is my last go at the NHL. I think a lot of people do wonder about the elephant in the room here, the Buffalo Sabres with John Tortorella. We'll get to more Torts talk coming up here in a couple of moments with Kevin. Cassie Campbell-Pascall from ESPN covering tonight's matchup between the LA Kings and the Colorado Avalanche. We'll talk plenty of specifically Western Conference NHL with Cassie and also get some PWHL talk in as well. Most notably, the impending expansion of the league by 2 teams. And as I mentioned, the Avs facing off against the Kings. One of them is 9-1. The other is 8-1-1 in their last 10. This one should be an absolute doozy. Looking forward to this one on the board a little bit later on tonight. All right, Cassie coming up bottom of the hour. Kevin Kurz will be with us here in a couple of moments. The Tortorella thing is fascinating. I think we all wonder about the timing. We wonder if, that was John Tortorella the other day throwing in the towel. I didn't feel that way to me. Like I mentioned on the show yesterday, I first saw the comments from John Tortorella before I heard them and saw John express them. Essentially saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm not interested in getting used to coaching a team like this in this situation. To me, that didn't feel like John Tortorella saying, that's it, peace out, check me out on Facebook, I'm done. To me, that was John Tortorella saying, we got to be better than this, that we don't want to get used to losing, which has been the mantra for John Tortorella since he started coaching this edition of the Philadelphia Flyers. But joining me now, Kevin Kurz, very close to the situation, covers the Philadelphia Flyers for The Athletic, and he joins me now. Kevin, first of all, thanks for stopping by. Second, I think a lot of us, to be blunt, are just, before we get into the why and the what's next, I think we're wondering about the timing. I know that after the loss against the Toronto Maple Leafs, some of the quotes that came out were awkward. I thought you did a great job on Morning Cup of Hockey yesterday, sort of explaining and sort of sharpening the pencil on what a lot of people are trying to make black and white here, when really it was shades of gray. Did this one catch you by surprise? And, we'll do the timing question first. The timing of this one is bizarre. Is it to you?
Yeah, it is. I was surprised it happened today. I don't think anyone would have been overly shocked if this was a move they made at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So, if you go back to Tuesday, I know those comments blew up, and I think you and I are in agreement about what he said.
Mm.
And I think he just probably used the wrong word, right? He's just frustrated that the team is where it is. I think he thought that this team could make a run, much like last year's team, where they played meaningful games up into the very last game of the season. And even if you just go back to March 1st, as recently as March 1st, they were playing pretty well. They had just come off a win of the beating the Winnipeg Jets in a shootout, I believe. So, I think he was just frustrated with the precipitous drop off. But, I think to me, it's almost like you have to go back to last year. And I think when the team did choke away its playoff spot, and really that's the only way to put it,
Yep.
he made a lot of mistakes over those final few weeks. He scratched Sean Couturier for 2 games. He called the team soft after they fought back to 1 a point in a really difficult circumstance where Ivan Fedotov was making his NHL debut. And, when you call a team soft, that's kind of a shot across the bow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, there were some other things too. He gets kicked out of the game in Tampa Bay, gets a 2-game suspension. So I think he pushed a lot of the wrong buttons over the final few weeks last year. And I'm wondering if you're Danny Briere, maybe did you see him scratch Cam York and then bench Cam York for 50 minutes on Tuesday and think to yourself, you know what? We've already decided we're going to move on after this season. Maybe we just do it now before something crazy happens.
The situation with Cam York is an interesting one. I mean, you can recall very well, you were closer to it obviously than I was, but when, a couple of seasons ago when we all thought, okay, Cam York's going to make his debut, he's going to make the team after a week and a half of training camp, they sent him down to the American Hockey League and he stayed there for a month and a half, 2 months. Igor Zamulin ended up taking his spot to kick off the season, and it wasn't until I think like late November, early December that we saw Cam York, and it's always been kind of I've always watched, what happens to the one player that the coach ends up sort of picking on here. And for whatever reason, sometimes coaches will pick a defenseman, and that will be like you'll get a sense of what the relationship is with the coach and his team based on his relationship with the one whipping boy. Would it be accurate to say that Cam York was that guy for John Tortorella?
Well, yes, he was. And that's why I kind of zero in on that, because we've seen other players that were sort of the target of Tortorella's ire, and they've moved on, right? If you go back 2 years ago, Kevin Hayes, Ivan Provorov, Tony DeAngelo, everyone, I wasn't here covering the team then, but everyone knew that those were guys that Tortorella didn't want to be in the dressing room anymore for whatever reason. They move on from those guys. Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee were often healthy scratched, benched, the subject of criticism, public criticism from Tortorella to us. So when they get moved to Calgary, that didn't shock anyone either. And to me, that was just a reflection of the fact that Briere, Keith Jones, and Dan Hilferty, the chairman, they were all having, and John's even said this, they were all in constant conversations about every player on the roster. And it was clear that a lot of the conclusions that Tortorella had drawn on certain players were then reflected in the moves that came shortly after that. So, as far as Cam York goes, it was odd. And, he scratches him, I think it was March 8th. And then Cam York comes out a couple days later and says, well, no one told me why I was getting scratched. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said there was no communication, which is exactly what Sean Couturier said 2 years ago. So hopefully Danny Briere clarifies this more at 5:00, which is in 2 more hours. But I do wonder if they just want to cut the cord now so that, everyone has a chance over these final few weeks to just move on. Everyone in the dressing room has a chance to move on and know that there's maybe a new voice coming over the summer.
So much of life here, I don't want to make this like a big sort of life lesson or anything or some grand metaphor, but so much about life is all about expectation, and how you react is based on expectation. There's a great line from a Tragically Hip song that goes, courage couldn't come at a worse time. And I do wonder about the wins last year. Like, did the wins last year come at a horrible time? Like, you're initiating a rebuild here. All of a sudden, the team goes on this winning streak and goes on a heater, and expectations are raised. I really do wonder, like, do you think things would be different if expectations weren't at least somewhat raised based on what we saw last season, or is that completely irrelevant by now?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, if you go back, it's only a year ago where people were talking about John Tortorella, maybe Jack Adams winner, right? Like, and obviously that's nothing new in the NHL. We've seen coaches fall out of favor very quickly in this league. I mean, I covered one. Pete DeBoer made the Western Conference Finals with the Sharks in 2019 and was out of a job in November. So, obviously this is not an unprecedented thing, but if you go back to last year, that was a team that, as you alluded to, everyone thought they were going to be one of the worst in the league, and they were right in the playoff picture through the middle of March. And the reason they were in that playoff picture is because so many of the young players had developed well under John Tortorella. Travis Sanheim, Travis Konechny, these guys are cornerstones now. They took huge steps under Tortorella. Rasmus Ristolainen's a guy that says, I wish I had been coached by Tortorella earlier in my career. And he's a guy that they value so much that they didn't even really put him on the market leading up to the trade deadline because they want him around when the team's ready to compete again, because some nights he's been their best defenseman. Tyson Forster, Cam York, Owen Tippett, even Sam Ersson before the bottom sort of dropped out of him. Yeah. They all progressed under Tortorella. And, the biggest reason the Flyers dropped out of the playoff race Tortorella's made some mistakes, but the biggest reason they dropped out of the playoff race last season and they weren't in it this season is because of the goaltending. You had the worst save percentage last season. You've got the worst save percentage this season. And obviously Carter Hart's departure, there's nothing they could really do about that. But, what's the old phrase? Show me a bad coach, I'll show you a bad goalie. Well, the biggest mistake that Danny Briere's made, let's not let him completely off the hook. The biggest mistake he made is bringing Sam Ersson. I still think there's something there. But the guys that have been backing him up are not NHL goaltenders, neither one of them. Yeah. And that was the same case last year after Hart left. The guys they had backing up Ersson weren't NHL caliber. So I know I'm getting into a lot of stuff here, but the young players did make progress last year. Some of them have been inconsistent last year, but then some other young players have been better, whether it's Noah Cates, Jamie Drysdale, and Matvei Michkov, I think, is having a fine season.
I don't like. I think back to Tim Murray and the Buffalo Sabres when they were tanking to try to get Connor McDavid. And every time a goaltender made a save, you remember this, Kevin, every time a goaltender made a save in Buffalo, he got moved out. Like, he got traded. It's like, no, that's not the program here. Like, the quickest way to hasten along a rebuild is to put off the goalie question. Or, put in goaltenders that aren't quite ready for prime time. I'm not saying that this is some elaborate plan here, but I just do wonder, because I agree with you. The old sayings about goaltending. The one that I always go back to, Kevin, is if you have a good goalie, it's 70% of your team. If you don't, it's 100. And I'm with you. Like, I haven't seen a coach fired where the goaltenders performed well. And maybe it's just too simplistic to look at this and say, well, there you go. They draw the straight line between the net and the bench. But here it is again. Like, even if they had like average goaltending, I do wonder if things would be different. But then I pause and say to myself, that's not the plan right now. Like, the plan is still for Payne and draft picks and prospects, and they got 3 first-rounders this year. Like that is still the program here. I do agree with you about the goaltending. I do agree with you about Ersson. I think that there is something there with Ersson. Has he played too many games too fast at the NHL? We can all discuss amongst ourselves. But is it too simplistic just to look at this and say the problem, once again, because this is the history of the Philadelphia Flyers, they don't have the goalie. And like, this goes back to like, there was that one, like, I remember Kevin, there was that one summer where Bobby Clark would have been the general manager, and the decision they had was between Curtis Joseph and John Van Beesbroek, and they went cheap. And they took John Van Beesbroek, and Cujo went on to become Cujo. But it seems as if like that old stereotype that goes back to I guess Ron Hextall would have been the last one, still looking for a goalie in Philly. The Carter Hart situation, we have to bracket. I think you're right about that. But again, 4x6, still a problem in Philly.
Yeah, it is. And, that's something that they're probably going to have to address in the offseason. You certainly can't come back with Sam Ersson and then these 2 guys that they have here right now. I think, that's a non-starter, and I think they know that. but this is an off season in which they want to add. They want to start finding talent again. I see people in my Twitter mentions or whatever talking about tanking again next season. No, that's not what they're going to do. Like they've been very clear. Danny Briere has been very, very clear that this is the bottom. And that's why, you're right. Bottoming out this season is certainly not a disaster for a team that doesn't plan on bottoming out next season. Yeah. They need another high-end prospect in the fold here. So, and I think they know that, and that's why they made some of the moves they made. But it's interesting. That's why you come back to the timing, the first question you asked, because obviously they just looked at Tortorella as the guy that they wanted to establish the foundation, the culture, the standard. And they don't see him as the guy that's going to stick around to take the team to another level. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago where we've had some real good back and forths with Tortorella. It's usually on off days between games. He's very patient. He's very honest and descriptive in his answers a lot of the time. And he was pushing back on a suggestion from a different reporter saying, well, your tenure's only 4 years. What about in 5 years when you might not be here? And he's like, well, how do you know what my tenure is? How do you know I don't want to keep coaching? I mean, he certainly was acting right up until the end as a guy that planned on being back here next season. So, again, I go back to my original point. I wonder if the Flyers had already made up their minds, however long ago, that he wasn't going to be the team to take them into the future, that because of some of those comments, because of the way they've been losing lately, just cut the cord now before, something terrible happens that leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth.
In your estimation, Kevin, what style of coach, maybe the better question is what age of coach would be right here for the Philadelphia Flyers next? Like, listen, Jay Woodcroft was there for a portion of training camp, brought there by John Tortorella. I think his name will probably be in the mix here in this conversation. I wonder about Pat Ferschweiler with Western Michigan. One of the obvious reasons there we can get to in a second.
Do you know he was Josie's line mate in Western Michigan?
I didn't know that. Oh, that's a nice one.
I heard that recently. Yeah. So that's an interesting name. Yeah. And they actually there's a prospect there that the
Alex
Flyers
Bump.
love. Alex Bump. Yeah. So anyway,
No, hang on. Let's pause on that for 1 second. Listen, Flyers have some wonderful prospects in the pipeline and some wonderful prospects on the horizon. Alex Bump, who's a 5th round draft pick, just looks tremendous for this team. And there are some people I know in and around the Flyers organization that would put him above someone like Jet Lachenko, who was their first rounder and almost made the team full time this season. Like, do you have a thought on what should people know about Alex Bump? Because the more people you talk to around the Flyers organization, the more it sounds like, this guy might be top of the list.
Yeah, they genuinely are excited about him. And I know it sounds cliche sometimes to say a front office is excited about such and such a draft pick, right? But I think they legitimately feel he might be the steal of the draft. And I heard, too, that he was a 5th round pick. And I heard that didn't sit well with him, that he was pissed off he went in the 5th round. So he carries a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, which, that's never a bad thing, right? I remember talking to Dan Boyle, who was well into his 30s when I covered him, and he was still pissed off that he hadn't gotten drafted at all, right? And it was still fueling him 10, 15 years later. So, he's a guy that I think they're going to try to get him here as soon as possible, right? You'll stick him on the Phantoms there if they make the playoffs. Jet Luchenko joined the Phantoms today. So, I don't know a whole lot about him yet. I actually had planned on digging into that a little bit today before
the news
crap hit the fan here. Yeah, so I don't know a whole lot about him yet, but
I'm just sort of throwing darts here. Ferschweiler makes a lot of sense to me. The other name, and he's someone who's been a candidate for NHL jobs before and has done wonderful work at the American Hockey League level right now with a resurgent Washington Capitals team. I wonder about someone like Mitch Love, who's an assistant with Spencer Carberry's. Again, this is going to be a lot of kids here, a lot of young players, and that's why I sort of lob that name out there. Mitch Love is going to be an NHL coach one day. I wonder if that could fit with the Philadelphia Flyers. But do you have a thought? I know it's all fresh, and the wound is still open for John Tortorella. We'll get there in a second, but an idea of maybe what kind of coach you could see coming in for Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, everyone always likes to say, well, if you had a real hard ass coach, then maybe you'll go for a more player friendly coach the next time, just to sort of
Yeah.
maybe bring these guys along a little bit. Considering the way the dressing room is, and they talk down the end about their strong culture and how much they all love one another and blah blah blah, right? But they did lose their emotional leader in Scott Lawton. He was the heartbeat of this team, and I don't think it's any coincidence that the losing started to come after they dealt Scott Lawton. So, I wonder if you bring in someone that's a little bit certainly just about every coach is going to be maybe a little bit less demanding than a John Tortorella, but I think if you're setting Vegas odds, you're putting the best odds on Rick Tocchet, right? Depending on what happens
Yep.
there in Vancouver. He's super close with Keith Jones, former Flyer, certainly fits into what many fans feel a Philadelphia Flyers coach should be, because they remember, a lot of them still remember him from the 80s, right? Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, or maybe they even give Brad Shaw a chance. I know they love Brad Shaw. They love what he's done with some of these defensemen. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm not sure I'd completely shut the door on that happening either.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's a fair question. I don't have an answer to it.
The other thing then becomes, what's next for John Tortorella? Is this John Tortorella's last team? Does he still want to do this? And if he does, is there opportunity out there? I wonder about Buffalo. Lindy Ruff has one more year on his deal. Terry Pegula really does love Lindy Ruff. I wonder about a bump up for Lindy Ruff and a position there behind the bench for John Tortorella. I mean, not exactly a secret. He's got a history with the Buffalo Sabres and the Rochester Americans. What do you think's next for Torts? Is that it for the NHL? Maybe a media career? Maybe write for The Athletic? Maybe do a podcast at Nation Network? I don't know. Like, what do you see John Tortorella doing next?
Yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, he hasn't texted me back yet, so I can't say I have any insight from him personally. I hope he gets back to me, but yeah, it's a good question. I mean, he had said coming into this job that this was his last stop, right? But like I said before, I certainly have never gotten the impression that he's ready to hang him up or anything like that. I think he wanted to stick around and see this thing through and see the Flyers grow as a team. I was a little surprised too that maybe not surprised, but I thought the possibility at least existed that they would keep him around in the front office, just because it always seemed to me like, yeah, his voice was someone that Briere and Keith Jones really valued. And again, I go back to the moves that they made. A lot of those were certainly Tortorella influenced. So, it's a fair question. I don't know. I would love to get into his mind and know if he still wants to keep going, but he did seem pretty upset with with the way things have been going. So I think if he was to jump into a job, it wouldn't be with a rebuilding team. It'd have to be with a team that was ready to win now.
Last one for you. I'm curious about the Flyers fan base. We've seen fans scream and howl for rebuilds before, right? All the team's going nowhere. I got to tear it down, got to rebuild, got to start over again. And the enthusiasm for that generally lasts about a season. And then fans start to get a little bit impatient and want to really start seeing some results. Everybody signs up for it. Everyone knows what they're getting into, but then there's the reality of the losses piling up. Where's the Flyers fan base at right now? I know they might have been spoiled a little bit by all the wins early last season, but where are Flyers fans today?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it does seem like so many of them were hoping they would bottom out and get a high draft pick. That's certainly happening this season. I mean, the way things are going, they're probably going to end up in the top 5, if not higher. That's why I go back to last year, and I think it would have been so valuable for them from a relevancy standpoint to make the playoffs. They get in, they're playing the New York Rangers almost definitely. I mean, even if you're just a casual fan, you'd say, wow, the Flyers are playing the Rangers in the playoffs. Like, I'm going to tune in and see that. And frankly, I think the Flyers would have given the Rangers a better series than I think they played Washington, right? They just sort of rolled over Washington. Yeah. So, that didn't happen. And Danny Briere was very clear even after last season when he said, just because we were so close to the playoffs this year, don't expect that to happen next year. There's still some pain to come here. So That's why I think they're really going to try to make some moves and better the team going into the next year. I know they're raising ticket prices on some seats.
Hmm.
They want to become relevant again. I think that's a big reason Keith Jones is here. Media friendly guy. He can get that message out.
Oh yeah.
So, in terms of where the fans are, I think the team right now they're so far off the radar with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl again. The Phillies are pretty good. The Sixers are more popular, even though they stink this year.
Hmm.
I think they're sort of biding their time. I think they're not necessarily upset that the team is off the radar right now, but next year is really going to be the year I think where we see some fans either lose their patience with everything or start to come back. Next year is
Yeah.
such an important year for management, just in terms of getting the fan base jazzed up again. And let's face it, John Tortorella was still a hugely popular guy here. I mean,
Hmm.
you go back to pregame introductions on opening night, him and Michkov, it was the ovations for those two guys when they introduced everybody. It was probably, I don't know who got the bigger ovation.
Hmm.
So I think you're gonna see a lot of casual fans that are pretty upset that John Tortorella is gone, and that's only gonna up the pressure on the front office to really do something significant this summer to try to get this turned around. Uh, Maybe not turned around in the right direction because I think they're fine with the direction right now, but to really finally see some results.
Makes a lot of sense. I know it's a busy day for you. Thanks for parking so much time with me today, Kevin. Much appreciated.
Hi, Jeff.
Enjoy the Briere presser, and we'll check back soon. No dull moments in Philly. Thanks, Kev.
You got it. Take care.
There he is, the great Kevin Kurz joins us from The Athletic, covering the Philadelphia Flyers. Pat Ferschweiler is a name, definitely, to pay attention to. Not sure which way this one is going to head. I know, I get it. Rick Tocchet hasn't signed an extension in Vancouver. We'll see where that situation heads. I know that's one that probably Philadelphia Flyers fans are wondering about. Jay Woodcroft is still very much out there as well, former head coach of the Edmonton Oilers. But Pat Ferschweiler is an interesting name. And I do throw Mitch Love out there sincerely because we've seen the work that he's done with a lot of young hockey players, and he's part of, right now one of the best benches in the entire NHL in Washington, where the head coach there is probably going to win the Jack Adams Award. And Mitch Love is a big part of it. So I do wonder about the assistant coach of the Washington Capitals. But again, we shall see which way this thing goes. And I'm glad that Kevin mentioned Keith Jones rather, as much as Kevin did, because that was one of the sneaky best front office hires that we've seen in a long time. First of all, Keith Jones knows the league, understands the league, understands relationships, has relationships with a lot of people, both in the game and on the media side as well. And when there are tough moments like we're seeing today with the Philadelphia Flyers, the one thing that Keith excels at is getting a friendly, positive message out, even in a situation like this, which is and can be very uncomfortable for an organization. There are very few people, like you can count on one hand, even if you could count them at all. Very few people that don't have time for Keith Jones in and around the NHL. Really sneaky good hire by the Philadelphia Flyers on a day like this. A guy like that is really important to get a sort of positive message / spin out there if you're the Philadelphia Flyers. So that is the major news of the day. Now, the major game of the night tonight, like dig in, there's a number. I mean, Thursdays are always busy nights around the NHL, and ESPN has the game of the night. It is the Colorado Avalanche facing off against the Los Angeles Kings. Analyst for ESPN, she'll be in the booth tonight, is the one and only Cassie Campbell-Pascall, and she joins me here. The maiden voyage, Cass, finally making your debut. My fellow Guelph alum, we have a new logo in Guelph, Cassie. I know. There we go. We overlapped very briefly in Guelph, and that's where I think you and I interacted for the first part. But first of all, welcome to the program. I want to get to LA and Colorado quickly. This one looks like the game of the night. Like when you prepare for this one, Cass, like how do you do it? Like these are two awesome teams going head to head tonight.
Yeah, I looked back at my notes, and the last time I did these two teams was like back in late October, November, and how the rosters have changed and health has been a factor in these two teams getting healthier. And I'm jacked about this game tonight.
Oh
I
yeah.
remember what Mr. Bob Cole always used to say, don't try and predict a game. Don't say anything, predicting a game, because just let it go. So tonight I'm just
Yeah.
gonna let it go. I pray that it's gonna be excellent. I think it's gonna be, and so much talent on the ice. And
Hmm.
uh, I'm looking forward to this one for sure.
So the curiosity that I have for this one, like whenever there's like two heavyweights, and I know this isn't like playoffs yet, although it would be wonderful to see these two teams face off against each other in the postseason, both at the heights of their powers. Like what, like you played, like what is interesting for you in a game like this? I mean, it's easy to look at, oh, you get to see Nathan McKinnon and you get to see, Cale Makar, and you get to see like what's turning into a murderer's row with the Los Angeles Kings and young stars like Quentin Byfield and the underrated Adrian Kempe. But like, what does it for you? Like going into this one, like where are the key moments of interest, Cass?
You want to play the best. I think that's your mentality as an athlete. You want to go up, if you're coming back from injury as a forward, your first practice back, you want to go up against the best defenseman in practice just to see if you're
Yeah.
ready and to make yourself better. And I think, you look at these two teams, what an opportunity to send a message to one another. Whether or not they meet in the playoffs is obviously to be determined, but just the depth down the middle now that both teams have, especially with Colorado and the additions that they made at the trade deadline, and the star power that both teams have, the depth on defense that both teams have, and almost maybe question marks in goal. And still for LA, Darcy Kemper, I think it's going to be David Riddick tonight, but there's still a question mark with him, even though he's won a Stanley Cup, and then the inexperience in Colorado. I think the similarity between these two teams, but as a player, you want to play against the best, and you want
Hmm.
to see how you're going to do. And you know that these are the types of games that make you better as a group. And I know, talking to a bunch of the Colorado Avalanche players today, they're really excited about what's been done to their team. They're almost giddy, and they kind of went through a year of unsure of what was going to happen, injuries and some personal situations, and they had 47 players play at their roster at least one game this year, and just a lot of unknowns. And then all of a sudden at the trade deadline, boom, you're like an instantaneous cup contender. And I think when you got guys like McKinnon and McCarr as an organization, you got to go for it. But you just got a sense being around the room there today that this is
Yeah.
a pretty giddy group, and they know they have the best chance now to potentially win a Stanley Cup.
Well, that's just it. Like I look at Colorado and I say, like, legitimately, like most of us, like this is a frightening team to play. Like it's the one team you don't want to play in the playoffs. They just look so good. And you're right, Cassie. Like you wonder, okay, what is that one trade that McFarland made that put them over the top? And we can talk about Nelson and Coyle, and that was great. And Natchez and Drury come in, and those are really good moves. But to me, it's Mackenzie Blackwood.
Mhm.
Like the
I think,
Colorado's
yeah.
Colorado's a team that doesn't need like Igor Shesterkin to win the Stanley Cup. You just mentioned Darcy Kemper. That's who they won the Stanley Cup with. But I really like Mackenzie Blackwood. Like in the last couple of years, he's really, become one of the sort of the best sort of comeback stories in the NHL. I wonder, like, if Colorado ends up doing this, and who knows if they will, but if they do, and we look back at like the moment that they quote unquote won the Stanley Cup or put themselves in the talk is when they redid the crease specifically with Mackenzie Blackwood. Agree, disagree?
I bang on. I think you know this better than anyone, goaltending and how important it is. But people think you just make trades; they just work out for you. I think they don't understand how difficult of a situation it was, how patient they were with their goaltending situation, waiting for those opportunities where maybe potential guys for trades could come up. They were really, 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 really patient, over like, a couple of years with their goaltending situation, hoping that they'd be able to get out of it, and then to pull this off and just to revamp your goaltending. And I think revamp the back end, that second pairing now. Obviously Josh Manson out, that's a huge loss for them, but that second pairing, with Ryan Lindgren, that's a move that maybe people aren't talking about because of the Coyle and the Nelson. That's been key. But a guy like Mackenzie Blackwood, you look at them, and Scott Wedgwood, they have
Yep.
3 games of playoff experience, and none of those 3 games are starts. But this is a guy that you can get behind. He's a little bit older, veteran, been there and done that, in the sense of everything he's had to, go through from an adversity standpoint, to get where he is today in the NHL, and the switching of teams. And both guys are a little bit journeyman-like. And, those are guys you can cheer for, right? You're like,
Yeah.
it's his turn now. It's his turn to come and get an opportunity in the playoffs to win a Stanley Cup. He's a battler. He works. He's a good teammate. There he was talking today to the media on a game day. So, just those are the guys I think that people like you and me can, gather around and sort of cheer for a little bit. And they've been playing great defensively. That's one thing Bednar has really been talking about
Hmm.
lately is just how good they've been defensively. And, that definitely helps the goaltenders as well.
You know what's interesting about Colorado and Chris McFarland specifically to me this year, Cassie? Every year, we keep hearing, "Oh, you know what? It's so hard. It's so hard to swap out two positions, goaltending and centers. Oh, no one's giving away goaltenders. Oh, no one's giving away centers." And you look what Chris McFarland's done. To your point, swapped out two goaltenders that are a better team because of it. Like, and recognized this early, and completely changed his goaltending. And then Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle, Jack Drury, bam, bam, bam. You win down the middle. There's three new centers, like high end for their position, and they're all slotted well. Like, you can go out and make moves for players. It doesn't make you and I have talked to this before. Like, there's sometimes you can go out and make moves, but the slot that you have for the player is too high. But you
Yeah.
got Brock Nelson, second line center. You got Charlie Coyle, your third line center, and Jack Drury's your fourth line center. Like, this is hand to glove. Like, this is like, again, like none of this is casual. None of this is frivolous. Chris McFarland just going out and making trades, fantasy GM like I would. Like, these are like deliberate elite level moves by a deliberate elite level general manager. Like, we shouldn't be surprised at this. Like, this is an excellent general manager hitting his stride.
Well, and I think when you have McKinnon and McCarr, you can't sit back and just, oh, we'll wait a couple years. I mean, you've got arguably two of the best
Oh yeah.
players in the league. And I know people will say McDavid, of course, but
Hmm.
McKinnon is right there. And then you've
Hmm.
got McCarr. I think as a general manager, you can't sit around, oh, I don't know. Should I do this? Should I? No. Like, you have an opportunity to get Nelson and Coyle, you just make it. I don't care what it costs you, you just do it because it's about winning now. You're in this bubble,
Yeah.
with players like that. The game I did in October, listen to this. This was their
Okay.
centerman for Colorado in October. McKinnon, Middlestat, Kelly, Parker Kelly, who's
Yeah, Park
actually
Kelly.
a winger,
Yep.
and Steinberg. And now they have McKinnon, Nelson, Coyle, and Drury. And like, wow, what a flip. And, I think
Yeah.
everything that this team's been through adversity wise earlier in the season, the Nuchishkin situation, the injuries,
Yep.
it was a grind. Like, it was a grind for those players that were out there playing and, just limited depth. And all of a sudden they could start getting healthy. And then all of a sudden they get rewarded with these trades. And honestly, you have to sort of see it to believe it to be around the rink this morning. Like, they were all
Hmm.
like little kids, and they can just feel they can just feel it. Obviously, you got to play the game and other teams
Yeah.
want to win too, but you just get the sense that the GM has done everything that he can to give this team the best opportunity, and they believe it too. And they
Uh,
feel really good about it.
I'm not sure if you had a chance this morning to talk to Nathan McKinnon at all. I always make the joke, like, we didn't know that he had upper teeth until they won the Stanley Cup because he just never smiled. He had nothing to be happy about. Like, oh, look at that. Nathan McKinnon does have an upper deck of teeth. Look at that. That's interesting. And he hasn't smiled since because it's back to trying to win the Stanley Cup here. But did you get a chance to talk to McKinnon, any of the Avalanche players? You mentioned, like, this is all like, kids on Christmas morning. Like, it's got to be fun to be part of a team like this. And I mean, you've been part of, gold medal winning teams. We're just like, you go into the rink because it's fun, because we're winning a ton and we're a powerhouse, and that's what it's got to feel like for Colorado. Did you get a chance to talk to anybody today, Cass?
It was interesting. McCarr and McKinnon were gone, so the door opens and they were gone.
Yeah.
They deal with all that stuff on a regular basis. But one guy that I really wanted to talk to was Keaton Middleton. I'd never met
Oh
him
yeah.
before, and I love Jake Middleton, his brother.
Yeah.
I love the way he plays, and I
Yeah.
hear so many great things about these guys. So I introduced myself to him. So we had a great chat, and just such a quality person.
Hmm.
But I talked to Jonathan Drouin, right? And the wingers now on the top two lines have sort of been interchangeable lately. And him playing in junior with McKinnon, but sometimes they'll put Drouin with Nelson and Nichushkin with Nelson. They seem to have found a perfect fit though with Lehkonen and Nikash with Nelson. But
Yeah.
um, just talking to Jonathan Drouin and, what he went through in his career facing a little bit of adversity. And again, just so happy the changes that have been made and they can all sort of feel, how good their team is right now. And, I wanted to talk to Brock Nelson. And, interesting enough with him, he played so long for the New York Islanders, that defensive game, the way that they play. And it's been a little bit of an adjustment for him because, Jared Bednar wants the up-tempo game in the defensive zone. Like he wants you to win the faceoff and get out of the zone and up the ice so fast. And he doesn't want the back and forth in the zone, the D to D, which, maybe happened a little bit more on Long Island. So it's been a little bit of an adjustment from him. I asked him, he goes, they have new faceoff plays. He goes, they just want us to up-tempo, just go, go, go. And he goes, at first I was so used to sort of that safe New York Islanders style. And he goes, then I realized, oh my goodness, I can go. So he's having fun with it. And, he's got 7 points in the 9 games that he's played. So got an opportunity to talk to him. And I've actually never met him before. So that was really interesting. Just a great guy and a lot of media around him this morning. So for him to take the extra 5-10 minutes with me, I really appreciate it. But those were sort of the 3 guys that I got an opportunity to speak, other than just listen to the scrums, get an opportunity to speak to them one-on-one.
Okay, let me go on a fishing trip now. You knew this was coming.
Uh-oh.
Cassie,
Yes.
what city are you in?
What city am I in? I'm
Yeah.
in Denver.
How many pro hockey teams are in Denver?
Pro hockey teams? There's one. Oh no, this is
Yeah.
like trivia.
No,
Okay.
this is good. No, you've answered all
Yeah.
the questions.
Okay.
Do you think there might be 2 soon? Or maybe in a
I know
couple
where you're
of years?
going. I know where you're going.
Just on a little fit, see if I can get one
Yeah.
on the boat here.
Well,
PWHL
what was amazing?
expansion.
Yeah, the PWHL, having over 14,000 people watch a game here this season. As you know,
Mhm.
hey, like I think the sky's the limit. You know what amazes me, Jeffrey,
What's
and
that?
for all of your listeners, I do call you Jeffrey.
It's true.
Is the fact that people have been talking about expansion since pretty much month 2
Yeah.
last year, and that's exciting. And that shows that we're making an impact. And, obviously we have lots of fans and the Canadian buildings are 100% full all the time. I will say this, and, those decisions, as you know, are made well above me. And, but I'm part of the hockey ops group. And I think, we'll be ready for when and if it happens. And,
Mhm.
I hope it happens because it shows that we're growing. It shows that our owner believes in us and supports us in the long term, which I think is really important for all the women involved to see, and the men for that matter. But Denver was great, and they put on a great show. And, you think of all of our takeover tours that we've had this year, I think 9 in total, and St. Louis is coming up this weekend. They've all put on a great show, and that's really fun for us to see.
See, I just wonder about time zones, right? Like I wonder about, that's why I know you can't comment on it, but I'm of the belief that it's going to be Seattle, Vancouver for the first round of expansion here. We'll see where it goes. I do wonder about Denver. Like that was really impressive. Like that was spectacular, and that's like another time zone here to tackle. I know that travel can be an issue as well, but still, just so that the league doesn't at least optically appear regional. I do wonder if it's like, okay, we're going out west, maybe Edmonton, something with a little closer for Minnesota, etc. But I'm with you. Like it's kind of does seem bizarre. Like here, the league is in year 2, and already it's okay. It's time to expand here, but it is. And you look at a lot of the other women's sports leagues, and right now, women's sports has a real momentum to it. So it's like, boom, we're expanding. Basketball, soccer, and hockey's right there. Like I know there's always going to be challenges. Like I know there's going to be challenges in some markets with the PWHL, but I don't think that should preclude this league from expanding, specifically where there's a lot of appetite for it. Was there? Let me ask you about this one. Was there one stop that surprised you? Like, ooh, wow, we didn't know there was this kind of support for this market. Was there one? And maybe was it Denver?
I can't say from a personal standpoint, just because I didn't go to all of them. I don't travel as much as I can with the PWHL, just because I travel so much for other things. And my boss, Jana Hefford, understands that I want to be home more. But I'll be honest with you, Jeff. I think I'm one of those players that came from a long generation ago. And I'm not surprised by anything because we knew in our hearts that even though, yes, we still have a long ways to go, we always believed in ourselves. We always believed in our game. We always believed in what we were capable of, and what the women's game was capable of. So I think surprise is the wrong word because we believed this was what was going to happen eventually one day for our game. But I think the smile that's on my face when I'm at home and I put on a PWHL game and the crowd and the play and the great ambassadors that our players are, I just kind of smile to myself, and it's like I always knew this was going to happen. I always believed it was going to happen. I didn't know when, but I always believed in it, and here we are. And we continue to work and continue to make this a business that prospers. But I think we're in the best place that we've ever been as a game. And, those are the things that make me proud. So not surprised, just really proud of everything that's happened.
Did you always feel this way? Like back when you were playing on the national team and winning gold medals at the Olympics and world championships? Was it that far back, or was it after that? I'll tell you, like one of the images.
What are you trying to say here? I'm old, or what's going on?
No, I'm not. I'm saying no. I'm
back. Yeah.
No. Listen, listen. That was, and listen. We still talk about those wonderful moments. We were talking about like Salt Lake around the Four Nations, and we were talking about Marie-Philippe Poulin and the clutchiest player that ever clutched around Four Nations. Like part of the cool thing about Four Nations this year was this wasn't a conversation that was exclusive to men. Like all of a sudden, like it's all the history of the rivalry. And I'll be honest with you, like the men have just caught up to the Canada-US rivalry. This has always existed on the women's side of things. And I know that, listen, I know the athletes always want to put a positive and it's all respect and we appreciate and respect one another. But I know how much you guys, like, I understand like the hatred, the hockey hatred. That was all there. I'm just curious, like, as far as like the phenomenon of a pro league as successful as this, like, was there a moment where you said this could really happen? Or as you mentioned, has this always been in the back of your head, always been in the back of your mind?
I remember selling out the All-Star game in Colorado, I want to say year 2000, and we sold that out. It was Canada US. And then the old Air Canada Center, we sold that out in 2001. We did have these moments when I played where we sold out those types of buildings. But I think the big difference right now is that women's hockey is a topic of conversation all hockey season long because you can actually see these players playing for their club teams, not just the national team. So we don't just go away and come back every 4 years or every World Championship or Four Nations. We're on television almost every other night in the US and Canada. And, the players are doing so much in the community and they're out there and people know them. And it's not just the top names anymore. And that's what impresses me about the league is that all the players that maybe never played on the national teams before, they're well known, especially in their own markets. And they've become, sort of household names between, within their own markets. And, I just think it's been incredible. It's fun. It's been amazing to watch. I'm having the time of my life working behind the scenes with our group. And yeah, there's just so many good things about it.
There, let me close on this one, Cass. There was last year a sign at one of the PWHL games, and I'm split on how I feel about this. Part of me thinks it's funny, part of me is embarrassed. And there were, I think there's 3 or 4 women in their mid to maybe late 20s who had a sign. You know where I'm going with this, I think. And the sign was, if we knew there would be a league, we would have tried harder. And part of me is like, oh, that's funny. And then the other part of me is like, wow, that's a real shot that these women never had a chance at it.
Yeah.
I know it's great that we should celebrate that it's here and all that, but then part of me is like, hockey kind of let these girls down.
Yeah. I still talk to people that think it's not going to work. They still tell me, they have the nerve to tell me, and I don't give them a right hook, but I still talk to people that are like, well, the US markets, this, and we're not sure. I don't think you should expand. I don't think it'd work. You're losing so much money. This, they say all these things that I'm not even privy to that information. And I'm like, can you just support us? Like, can you just just support us, you know? So I think we have that internal motivation that people have always told us we couldn't do this. And so
Yeah.
the more you tell us that, the more we're going to continue to push and to continue to strive. And I think that's the mentality of anyone who has been pushed down in society. And that's I think our strength internally that we have is that we continue to push and grow together. We have an unbelievable hockey ops team who are so unselfish, and no one cares who gets the credit. Everyone just does all the jobs that need to be done behind the scenes, and our staff of our teams and our players and everyone, our business ops people. I'm on the all company calls, and like these people care and they just want to do a great job. And so this has been great. This has been really fun, and we just got to continue to get better and better.
Don't tell an athlete she can't do something. I haven't learned much, Cassie. I haven't learned much. The one thing I have learned is don't tell an athlete she can't do something. I'll tell you what, let me actually close on this one. When I talk to young people that are getting into the business, I always share advice that you gave me back from 2008 when I started to do rinkside at Hockey Night. Do you remember the advice you gave me? I've never forgot it.
We talked about this before, but tell me again. I forget.
Always bring mints.
Yes. Always have mints.
Do you want to share why, for all the people that want to get in the industry, why, as a rinkside host, you should always have mints?
Listen, there's nothing worse than an athlete doing an interview with a broadcaster who, let's just say it's like they haven't brushed their teeth in a long time
and just had 8 coffees.
You cannot get your answers out fast enough, and you just won't get a good interview. If you have bad breath, you just won't get a good interview. Like when I was a reporter, I used to have mouthwash in my studio.
Yeah, I know, I've heard.
I would have those Listerine things, you know. I was like obsessed about it because I knew I had no chance of getting good answers if I had bad breath. So I was like, Kelly Rudy's the same. He brushes his teeth all the time because he probably knows too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, this segment right here alone, we should get like a Listerine sponsorship or something.
Something.
It is. It is. It's a true story.
It makes a lot of sense. You're the best. Okay, we'll be watching tonight. It is LA and Colorado. It is the game of the night. And who better to handle it than Cassie Campbell-Pascall. Cassie, thanks as always for stopping by.
All right. See you later, Jeffrey. Take care.
There she is, Cassie Campbell-Pascall from ESPN, handling the affairs for what will be the night of the game. What do you think about that advice, young Zach?
That is the same advice that you gave me, I believe, and you passed it on and said that was what Cassie told you, and you gifted it on to me. So
now it's your responsibility,
and
it's your burden. It's your burden now to carry this knowledge, young Zach, and pass on to the next generation of broadcaster.
Now I got to hand this one down. That's the piece of information that just continues to move down the line. Okay.
Yeah. Bring mints wherever you go. Bring mints. Do yourself a favor, and everybody else around you. Bring mints. Okay. That was quite the day with the John Tortorella situation. Thanks to Cassie for stopping by. Thanks to Kevin Kurz for stopping by. We do have a couple of more things. First of all, how was the chat the last little while? I've been trying to peek down and get a sense of what's going on. Anything noteworthy? Any insults? Any slander? Okay, what's going on now?
Yeah. Well, I've been firing polls up in the chat and seeing what people are thinking about everything. I don't know if you see the most recent one. After Cassie called you Jeffrey, I put up a favorite name for Jeff. Yeah. Jeff, Jeffy, Jeffrey, and Gramps, as Big Willie called you the other day.
Yeah, that's good.
And Sarah Veenstra says, the one true name for Marek is, in quotes, Spoon, because he loves to stir shit up.
Spoon. No, that's Natalie. That's Natalie Spooner's nickname. She's always called me Jeffrey. Cassie and I overlapped at the University of Guelph in the early 90s when she was a player there. So she would have started at Guelph, I think, in 92. So I would have been in my second year at Guelph, and we used to play men's league hockey there on, was it Tuesdays or Thursday nights? And she was a waitress at Griff's Sports Bar at the athletic center, and so that's where I met Cassie. She was a star on campus, star player for the University of Guelph. I remember there was a time where she was going to quit because she was done with the coach. And you think about like the repercussions for hockey in Canada. If honestly, she was done. Cassie Campbell-Pascall was done. She was going to retire, hang it up. She was not going back. And Guelph changed coaches. She decided to go back, and the rest, as they say, 2 gold medals at the Olympics and 6 World Championship golds. The rest, as they say, is history. But I would see Cassie every Tuesday or Thursday. We lived on the same street on Elizabeth Avenue in Guelph, so we'd bump into each other every now and then. And then became co-workers at Hockey Night after a number of years, as she was wildly successful, and I cobbled together a tiny little media career, and then we crossed at Hockey Night, and have always been always stayed in touch and always been good friends and colleagues. And she's a delightful person and super smart and super hardworking. I'll tell you what, I used to do a show on Sirius, Hockey Night in Canada Radio, from like 2007 to 2011. It was a daily show, 3 hours long on Sirius. And the premise of the show, Hockey Night in Canada Radio, every show I would have one co-host from Hockey Night in Canada. So Kelly Rudy would be on one day, Craig Simpson would be on one day, Scott Oak, Cassie was a constant. I think it was every Wednesday Cassie was on. And I remember something she told me. We were out, I was out in Calgary for some event, and we went out to dinner, and we were just shooting the shit. And I said, like, Cassie, like, I really got to hand it to you. Like, of everybody, no offense to anybody else that I was working with, but like she was so well researched for every single show, so well prepped. And she said, look, the one thing you have to understand is I have to over prepare for everything, because if I make a mistake as a woman in hockey media, there's no coming back. A guy can make a mistake, like I'll flub up a name and everyone just shrug it off like, oh, well, you messed up a name. She said, like, if I make that mistake, it's like, she doesn't belong here, she doesn't know her shit, she can't, like, I'm like, geez, Cass, like, you're kind of right. She's like, I have to over prepare for everything because I don't get that break. And that and the mints always stuck with me, Zach, about Cassie. But I've got all day for her. She's got beautiful family, wonderful person, hardworking, super talented, Cassie Campbell-Pascall. Chat, do anything with Tort. And yes, Striatic, put Cassie in the Hall. That would be interesting because she's also on the selection committee for the Hockey Hall of Fame, so she would have to excuse herself from any vote. But I do think that I think that inevitably Cassie's going to get in. Great forward, great defender, success is obvious. To say nothing of every, like, I would do, like, when I was at Hockey Night, when I was on CBC, and I would do Hockey Day in Canada every year. We'd do a banquet on the Thursday, and every time, like, there's a couple of things that would get massive ovations. When they brought in the Stanley Cup, it would get a massive ovation. When Ron and Don entered, and they would, MC and host the whole event, they would get a massive ovation. And when Cassie showed up, it would be an incredible ovation when Cassie would go to these banquets. And the eyes of little girls in the crowd were like incredible. About like, wow, like we have like one of our own, like a hero that we can look up to. It's the old saying of you don't achieve greatness until you can attach yourself to something greater than yourself. And so that's why you see so many athletes in the PWHL now that'll tell you, like, yeah, when I was 8 years old, I met Cassie. When I was 10 years old, I went to Cassie's hockey school, and I watched Cassie, or I saw all these things. Like, the effect that she's had on Canadian hockey players and the Canadian women's hockey scene is incredible, and it's deep. And I agree. Like, I'm telling you, she has to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame one day, and she's going to get there. But she's so successful, she's on like the committee that votes, so she would have to excuse herself. Anyhow, anything about the Tort situation from the chat today? YSE Zach.
Yeah,
I see that because
like
Julia Tosheri's in the chat. I see.
Yes, I see as well. I think one of the biggest things that we were seeing was people who were leaning more towards him going to Buffalo here. That seems like the next step that people have pointed out online. I saw Pete Blackburn make a joke earlier today, sent it to you. I was laughing. Good. He's like, so good. Like, imagine just Tage is getting healthy scratch next year. I just start running this through my head.
The weird thing is we can all see it.
I know.
The
It's
first,
it's
like,
funny.
the
Haha,
first
and then
the
it
first
happens.
straight leg back check from a superstar is going to be like 48 hour media spin. It's going to be like 48-hour
Yeah.
complete eruption, just like what he did with Sean Couturier. If he ends up going to the Buffalo Sabres, I think we can all see that going away. And it's like I think a lot of
Yeah.
us can see him going to Buffalo. By the way, not to keep banging on this one, you see who's starting for the Buffalo Sabres tonight?
Yeah, the Optimus rhyme, 3 straight.
James Reimer. Just saying. I've seen it before. Playing the goalie. Okay.
Yeah.
Do so at your own peril.
I mean, look, not trying to just throw daggers at Buffalo, the people of Buffalo, the fans of Buffalo. One of the things that I see keep coming through right now is, well, they're not going to trade him. He signed a 5-year deal.
Matters not. Matters not.
Like,
That
I
makes
think
him,
the
honestly,
amount that matters is
trust me. Trust me. You know what makes, outside of how good a goaltender he is, you know what makes him really attractive for another team?
he's got term.
At a really good number. Like at a really, really good number. Listen, all I'm saying is if they're going to try to pin this whole thing on the goaltending, do so at your own peril. Do so at your own peril.
Do you think Torts is actually done, Jeff? Just your your opinion.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
No,
I have a
understand.
hard time believing, like, honestly, I look at all coaches and I say, it's Hotel California. Check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. Like, the Buffalo Sabres come to John Tortorella 5 times 3. It's not going to take it.
Yeah. Like Rick Bowness is unreal on the panel, and I watch him like, that guy's going to leave the second a job comes up. He's a good coach.
He
I think he
is.
would leave.
I know all these guys too, right? I get it. Like, oh, okay, this is my expiration date. It's just going to be, we're going to build a house in BC and we're going to stay there and we're going to live there. But then, like, it's so hard for these guys just to turn off the competitive juices. Like, I've told you this story before, I think, with
That's what it is.
Berkey, right? Did I tell you the story with Berkey when he took the Penguins job?
Yeah, and he was
So
at Sportsnet, and he just didn't want to.
I remember asking him, I was
walk
like,
away not competing.
do you hate, like, leaving the studio and not giving a shit who won and lost? And he's like, yeah, I hate it. I hate leaving the night, because I would work with him and Elliot on Wednesdays. He said, I hate leaving the studio and not caring who won or lost that game because I've got no skin in it. That's why I think for a lot of these guys, like, they just live on that thrill where the highs have to be super high. It's just like adrenaline junkie stuff. And the lows are super low. Like, they have a hard time, like, sort of living a calm sort of Zen life. They need the charge of having skin in not just their games, but all the games around them, because it affects them. That's why I have a hard time when someone says, oh, I'm done. Really? Okay. Like, having said that, I do think that, and I think it's just a family thing too. I do think that Rick Bowness, watch, he's going to get hired in Philadelphia tomorrow. I do think that Rick Bowness is done. Oh, hang on. Flyers just sent out a press release. I think I think that he is probably done, but I am like you. Like, I watch him on TNT, and that's like a great gig for him. Like, pop in and out on TNT. It's awesome. He's dynamic. He's fantastic. He'll show up on Hockey Night too. Then I say to myself, how's this guy done? He's so smart. He's still got so much to offer. How's he done?
Yeah.
These guys love that charge, man. That's what I think. That's what I think about. That's
Would
what I
agree
think
with
about
that.
Torts. That's what I think about Torts. And it would be like a nice little completion if he ends up going to Buffalo. And I don't think, like, honestly, Buffalo, even though I know it's been an awful year, I've said this before about the Sabres. I look at the Buffalo Sabres and I like so many players on this team. I just don't like them in the positions that they're in. But like, it's the same, like, you look at the Sabres and go, like, I really like Rasmus Dahlin. I really like Tage Thompson. Noah Ostland's going to be an incredible player one day for the squad. Like, so many players on this team you really, really like. You just like them in the spot that they're in.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they're, like, starting from zero in a rebuild. So I don't think John Tortorella would look at this and say, okay, we're starting from scratch. Let's roll up our sleeves. I don't get that sense about the Swords. I don't.
Yep.
How about
Agree with
that?
that.
All right. We got games tonight. We got games tonight. You got to watch games. I got to watch games. We all got to watch games. You got to work after games and before games. Here we go. The Sheet, powered by our friends and partners at FanDuel. Always like to remind you of that fact. Home of the same game parlay. Make every moment more on FanDuel. And would like to remind you as well. Daily updates, roster updates from our daily Faceoff Fantasy Twitter feed. And speaking of the Buffalo Sabres, at the KeyBank tonight, James Reimer. Did we mention James Reimer gets his third start in a row? Stop making stories that aren't there, Marek. Okay, we'll see. Reimer starts. Tristan Jarry goes for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Malkin with the upper body injury. He is OUT out. Jason Zucker with a personal situation. He will not play for the Swords this evening. Ottawa and Detroit at Little Caesars. Allmark versus Lyon in that one. Utah-Tampa could be a banger at Amalie Arena. The Bolts in an Atlantic dogfight, as you very well know, Zach. 2 points separating 1, 2, and 3 in the Atlantic. And as we all know, finishing first in that division is really, really important because nobody wants to face any combination of those three in the opening round. The Philadelphia Flyers with their new interim head coach Brad Shaw at the Wells Fargo facing off against the Montreal Canadiens. Flyers coming off that loss against, what team was that again the other night on Tuesday? Young Zach. Habs fighting for the wildcard lives, 1 point up on the Islanders. Yesterday, by the way, the Vancouver Canucks were Johnny Lazarus' favorite team in the world.
Know.
In the world. 1 point up on the Islanders and Rangers. Dobesh gets the start there. Washington and Minnesota. 6 to go for Ovi, and good news on the horizon for Minnesota. Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek are skating your St. Louis Blues and our Robert Thomas facing off against the Nashville Predators at Bridgestone Arena tonight. Calgary and Dallas could be a good one as well. Dustin Wolf gets the start there. Welcome back, Mikael Backlund. Los Angeles and Colorado at Ball Arena. Talked with Cassie about that one. Edmonton and Seattle, Climate Pledge Arena. Joey Decord starts there. What did you make of the Stuart Skinner situation from last night getting taken out? And by taken out, I don't mean that Mikko Rantanen deliberately went and took him out, but taken out of the game. And Olivier Fortier gets who got called up today? Olivier Rodrigue called up. Netminder for Bakersfield gets called up today to the Edmonton Oilers. I looked at it as pure accident. Rantanen is skating by the crease, and then Skinner drops down in front of him. It's a tough one, but
drops down in front of him, and if you watch it from the overhead, he progressively kind of goes forward. Like, I don't think he's doing it intentionally to go into Rantanen to draw that contact or anything, but the motion of where he's going kind of down and out. Rantanen's trying to go around. That's a big body moving in full speed there. I don't think there's any intent behind that at all.
Nope.
I don't think at all. No.
I agree. I know there were many that were complaining about a couple of things. Stuart Skinner last night. Connor Bedard with Simon Nemec as Bedard's holding Nemec's stick and he tries to get it away from him. So he cross-checks Bedard on the ice and people are screaming and howling for a penalty. Let go of the stick. It's pretty simple to me. Like, you don't want to get a hit, let go of the guy's stick. It's been a tough season for Bedard. I hate picking on him. It's been a tough one. He feels it.
That's a guy who's ready for this to end, like this year to end. He's ready to just get away, not have a camera, a mic near him, just be out of the spotlight and tell everyone, see you in September. Like, get me out.
Get me to the World Championships now. Can the World Championships start now? Can I leave and just go? Thank you very much. And the Toronto Maple Leafs face off against the San Jose Sharks. Philly, tee up your programs tonight.
Well, if the Leafs lose to the Sharks tonight, by the time people wake up tomorrow morning, I still might be on the air yelling and screaming. So let's just hope that doesn't happen. Also, Jeff, who starts games at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time? That's 7:30 local in San Jose. Who did this? Can't we all figure out?
It's so hard. The thing is, it's so hard to get. The thing is, like, if you're trying to get out that night too, it's a real problem because you got to hustle in the room. And, like, you can't have, like, the goaltender's got to hit the table for 45 minutes after the game because you got to hustle. Like, you got to get out. The 7:30 starts in San Jose tend to be a killer for a lot of these teams. A lot of people point at Doug Wilson for that one. Come on, Doug, with the 10:30 starts, but He always used to get crap for the 7:30 starts, or 10:30 if you're watching in the East. Okay, there's our program for today. We made it through. The technology is fixed. It's solved, and we're back like a vertebrae. And you know who's back like a vertebrae tomorrow? Brian Burke. Makes his regular Friday stop here on the program, so looking forward to that. Get your questions and comments in for Berkey. Use our email, thesheet@thenationnetwork.com, or the tweets, either to me, to Zach, or the Sheet account for that matter. Okay? Thank you very much to Cassie Campbell-Pascall from ESPN for stopping by. Thank you very much to Kevin Kurz from The Athletic for stopping by. The big news of the day, the dismissal of John Tortorella. We'll see what type of comments General Manager Daniel Briere has here in about 50 minutes time before the Philadelphia Flyers play this evening. And if anything happens, we'll bring it to you tomorrow with full comment from, as we like to say, let's get ready to grumble, the one and only Brian Burke. Got it? Enjoy the games tonight. We'll talk to you tomorrow. If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.